Hello viewers, you're watching Afghanistan Report. I'm your host Swati Kundra. The main stories are: Shia Hazaras protest at Beheadings puts pressure on Ghani government. British diplomats and military officials mark Remembrance Day in Kabul. MSF says hard to believe US strike on Afghan hospital was a mistake. Thousands of protesters in Kabul have marched coffins containing the decapitated bodies of 7 Shiite Hazaras to demand justice for the gruesome beheadings by militants. However, Afghan President Ashraf Ghani appeals for calm after angry protesters tried to force their way into his Kabul palace. We have a report.
President Ghani appealed for calm after angry protesters from the ethnic Hazara community tried to force their way into his Kabul palace on November 11 to demand justice for 7 members of their community beheaded by Islamist militants. In one of the biggest demonstrations seen in Kabul in years, thousands of people marched through the Afghan capital to demand government action after the killers dumped the partially beheaded bodies of their victims. At one stage, protesters attempted to scale the walls of a building near the palace, prompting police to fire warning shots to scatter the crowds. 7 people were wounded, including 5 from bullet wounds. Besides swelling the daily toll of killings, the deaths of the 7 Hazara, who included 3 women and 2 children, have heightened the risk of sectarian hatred, further poisoning relations in a country made up of a patchwork of ethnicities.
دشمنان ما می‌خواهند با خلق حادثه‌های که رنگ قومی و منطقه‌ای به آن می‌دهند اتحاد و یکدلی ما را از ما بگیرند. آنان دیدند که در دیگر جبهات شکست مفتضحانه خوردند. دیدند که منطقه کور آنان جای در این خاک ندارد.
Heading an unwieldy national unity government, which has come under growing pressure because of deteriorating security, the president promised action.
مانند شما من نیز تا آن زمانی که عاملین این جنایات به عدالت کشیده نشوند آرام نخواهم داشت. همچنان دستور دادم تا تمام تدابیر لازم را که در حدود امکانات دولتتان است جهت امن سازی شهرهای کشور و جلوگیری از تکرار چنین حوادثی روی دست گرفته شد. ما مصمم هستیم که انتقام خونین هموطنان را بگیریم و در این راستا از هیچ تلاش دریغ نخواهیم کرد. اما باید داشته باشیم که تمام اینها در صورت امکان پذیر می‌گردد که بر احساسات خود غالب شویم. از واکنش‌هایی که موجب حرج و مرج می‌شود اجتناب کنید.
The demonstrators said Hazara people were being killed every day on roads between Ghazni, Bamiyan and Wardak provinces to the west of Kabul, where the hardline Islamist Taliban movement controls much of the countryside after international forces stopped most combat operations last year.
تمام عزیز که رئیس جمهور بیاید اینجا برای مردم ما باید پاسخ بده، پاسخ شهدا رو بده. چرا امنیت نیست در کشور؟ چرا چیزی که وعده کرد با کمپاین خود باید امر عملی میکرد، یک ذره عملی نشده.
Besides blaming the Taliban and Islamic State, some Hazara took to social media to point the finger more generally at Pashtuns, Afghanistan's largest ethnic group, from which Islamist movements recruit most of their followers.
British diplomats and military officials gathered in Kabul for a Remembrance Day ceremony to commemorate the soldiers who lost their lives in combat. We have a detailed report.
The British Embassy in Kabul on November 8th held a Remembrance Day ceremony to commemorate soldiers who died in combat. Remembrance Sunday, the last Sunday before November 11th, has been held since the end of the First World War to remember Britain's war dead. British Ambassador for Afghanistan, Karen Pierce, spoke about those who died fighting in Afghanistan.
We remember and we salute all those who risked, and especially those who gave, their lives to bring peace to Afghanistan. For those of us who are far from home, we can think with confidence of the words on the monument the Turks erected at Gallipoli, and we can say to our armed forces and their families, those heroes who shed their blood and lost their lives, you are now lying in the soil of a friendly country.
Representatives from Canadian and Australian embassies also attended the ceremony. Britain is set to extend its military presence in Afghanistan by a year due to the ongoing security challenge faced by Afghan forces. The decision followed an announcement by President Barack Obama earlier this month that the United States would slow the pace of troop withdrawal due to the very fragile security situation there.
And in Afghanistan, it is particularly poignant as our mission goes on here. We've lost over 450 British soldiers in the course of our mission here. But everywhere across the globe where the British forces are deployed, you will see them commemorating Remembrance Sunday.
Britain has around 450 troops involved in training at the Afghan National Army Officer Academy, working with the Afghan security ministries and supporting NATO operations in Kabul.
Moving on, many Afghans who have left their homes for a safer place are struggling to get shelter. In Turkey, many of them are feeling desperate as doors continue to close and winter approaches.
A park in central Istanbul has been taken over by Afghans. After selling all they owned to escape the threats of Taliban and IS insurgents back home, those people are stuck in Turkey with little or no money to move on. And they say they're desperate as doors continue to close across Europe and winter approaches.
زیر پول هستیم چیکار کنیم باید بریم دیگه مشکلات ها رو باید جواب خود بگیریم از دولت ترکیه میخوایم که همکاری کنه که ما بریم مثلا اروپا.
Turkey has lost up to $8 billion in lost trade and plummeting tourism in the last 4 years. The 2.2 million new guests in Turkey are also hurting the country in another way.
We see those hurting and tragic pictures on the TV screens and everywhere. So that has brought upon Turkey a kind of social burden in terms of human dimension.
I wasn't happy to leave Kabul. My family, my father and mother just told me that we have to live here because the Taliban threat. From current situation, yes, they really regrets now.
The EU wants to give Turkey $3.2 billion to keep the refugees, but the proposal has not been received favorably by Turkey.
Medical aid group Medicines Sans Frontières says it is hard to believe a mistake caused a deadly US strike on an Afghan hospital, as it had reports of fleeing people being shot from an aircraft. A report.
The US says this was all a mistake. Medical aid group Medicines Sans Frontières says that it is just too hard to believe. More than 30 people were killed when the MSF's hospital in Kunduz was hit by a US airstrike last month. Afghan government forces were battling to regain control of the city from Taliban forces. MSF General Director Christopher Stokes says they're still waiting an explanation from the US military because their own internal report describes witnesses who say people fleeing the scene were being shot at from the air.
The view from inside the hospital is that this attack was conducted with a purpose to kill and destroy. And this was certainly my impression when I was in Kunduz 2 weeks ago.
Two separate investigations by the US and NATO are underway. And White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest says they need to take their time for a thorough review.
The other thing that the Department of Defense has made clear about this investigation is that it will consider a series of potential human errors, failures of process, and technical malfunctions that may have contributed to the mistaken strike.
MSF says the site's location had been clearly communicated to both Afghan forces and the Taliban, and that there were no militant fighters inside the building at the time. Stokes says the hospital cannot reopen until MSF gets answers.
With that, we come to the end of this week's episode of Afghanistan Report. I'm Swati Kundra taking your leave. We will be back next week with more news and views from Afghanistan. Goodbye and Khuda Hafiz.